June 7, 2022. South Jackson, Mississippi. In the darkness of apartment 312 on Fleetwood Drive, Terentia Jackson sleeps beside her new boyfriend, Henry. Her face was peaceful, a woman finally free from a relationship that had slowly suffocated her spirit. Tomorrow she has work. Tomorrow, she'll pick up her daughter from her mother's. Tomorrow, but for Terentia, tomorrow will never come. Outside, a figure moves with purpose. Not a stranger, not a random intruder, but someone who once knelt before her with a diamond ring. Someone who promised forever, but couldn't accept her goodbye. The sound that shatters their sleep isn't a knock. It's not a doorbell. It's the sound of obsession arriving with terrible purpose. Terentia's eyes open to her worst nightmare, her ex-fiancé's Virian Brent standing in the bedroom doorway. The gun in his hand has already decided her fate. By the time police arrive at 4:04 a.m., 3 people have been shot. Only 2 will survive. The bed where Terentia sought safety was now soaked in blood. The floor where she once stood was littered with shell casings. Just months earlier, this same man had knelt before her with promises of love. Now, those promises lie as shattered as the door he just broke through. But what transforms a man from a loving fiancé to a midnight executioner? The answer lies in text messages never shared, warning signs never heeded, and a justice system that failed at every turn. This is the story of Terentia Munchie Jackson, a mother, a daughter, a woman who believed she had escaped her past. But some pasts refuse to let go. Some loves turn to possession. And sometimes, the most dangerous moment in a woman's life is when she finally says goodbye. What her killer didn't count on was leaving a witness. A witness who would not only fight back, but would make sure the world never forgets the woman known as Munchie. Welcome to True Crime Tales HQ, where we don't just tell stories, we expose the truth behind the headlines that shatter lives and communities. Before we dive into today's case, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Each subscription helps us continue bringing these important stories to light, and hitting the notification bell ensures you never miss an upload. Comment where you are watching from, and if you find this story impactful, please share it. Your share could literally save someone's life. To the morning news reports, she was just another statistic. A 26-year-old woman, shot and killed in South Jackson. But to those who knew her, Terentia Jackson was never a headline. She was a Munchie, a nickname that captured her essence long before tragedy found her. Born on May 12, 1996, Terentia grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, a city known as much for its soul as for its struggles. Friends describe her as playful, sweet, and unapologetically joyful, someone who approached life with a warmth that drew people in. But nothing in Terentia's world shone brighter than her daughter, Zorencia. Her social media told the story of a mother who documented every milestone, every smile, every precious moment. For Terentia, motherhood wasn't just a role, it was her purpose. Even as she built a career and pursued her own dreams, her daughter remained at the center of her universe. The bond between them was palpable in every photo, every video, a love story more profound than any romance. Beyond motherhood, Terentia built a life of structure and meaning. As a dedicated employee at UPS, she was known for her reliability and work ethic. Colleagues speak of a woman who brought the same energy to her job that she brought to everything else, full-hearted and committed. Faith anchored her life. As a faithful member of Jehovah Jireh Church, Terentia found community and purpose that extended beyond herself. It was there she cultivated the spiritual foundation that friends say guided her decisions, especially during life's challenges. In a family of 8 children, standing out isn't always easy. But Antoinette Jackson and Terrence Womack's second-born had a way of shining. Among her 7 siblings, 4 sisters and 3 brothers, Terentia was often the connector, the one who brought people together with her infectious energy. Those who knew her best speak of a young woman determined to experience life beyond the boundaries of her hometown. She traveled when she could, collecting moments and memories, expanding her world while staying rooted in her family and community. And then there was her playful side, the one that couldn't resist pulling pranks on her stepfather McDuffie. These weren't just jokes. They were expressions of love, moments of lightness she created and shared with those around her. This is the woman who was lost that June morning, not just a victim in a police report, but a daughter, a sister, a mother, a friend. A woman with dreams still unfulfilled. A life still in the process of becoming. But to understand how Terentia's story ended, we need to understand how another chapter began, with a relationship that would start with promise and end with violence. With a man named Virian Brent, who would capture her heart before he took her life. The question that haunts everyone who loved Munchie isn't just how she died, but how the man who once claimed to love her could become her executioner. The answer begins with a romance that, like many, showed only its best face to the world. When Terentia first started dating Zvirian Brent, 29, their social media told a story everyone wanted to believe. Date nights at local restaurants, picnics in the park, selfies that captured what seemed like genuine happiness. Friends described those early months as a fairy tale, two young people building something real, creating traditions, making plans. Those who knew them both saw a couple committed to building a life together. When they welcomed a child together, it felt like the foundation was set. For Terentia, already a devoted mother to Zorencia, expanding her family with Zvirian seemed to cement their future. The photos from this period show a man who appeared to embrace fatherhood, a woman glowing with the possibility of it all. Then came the moment that should have been the beginning, but now feels like an ending. Terentia's birthday celebration, a day that would mark both the height of their relationship and the first crack in its foundation. Watch this moment carefully. Zvirian drops to one knee, producing a ring box. The room erupts in anticipation. But Terentia's face, there's something there. Something beyond surprise. That hesitation. How long was it? 5 seconds? 10? In real time, it might have seemed natural. But knowing what happened next, that pause becomes a silent scream none of them heard. Eventually, she said yes. Friends cheered. Social media exploded with congratulations. But something had shifted in that moment, a glimpse behind the curtain that no one, not even Terentia herself, fully recognized. The months following the proposal tell a different story. Friends who were close enough to see past the Instagram posts noticed the changes. Dates became less frequent. The playful banter that once filled their social media went quiet. Those who knew Terentia best speak of conversations that became more guarded, smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. The woman who loved to plan trips and adventures seemed suddenly content staying home. It's unclear what exactly happened behind closed doors. Terentia was private about her struggles, a trait that, in retrospect, may have been a protective instinct rather than discretion. But eventually, something inside her said enough. Friends describe a conversation where Terentia finally named what she couldn't face before: this relationship wasn't what she needed. What looked like love had become something else entirely. The day Terentia told Zvirian it was over, she believed she was taking control of her life. She couldn't have known she was actually starting a countdown, one that would end in the early morning hours of June 7th. When the proposal that never felt quite right would be answered with violence instead of vows. What Terentia did next was what any woman deserves to do after recognizing an unhealthy relationship. She opened her heart to new possibilities. She met someone who offered something different, something that felt like the piece she'd been missing. His name was Henry, and to those who watched Terentia begin this new chapter, the difference was striking. The guarded smiles were gone. The hesitation that had marked her last months with Zvirian was replaced by something lighter, easier. But while Terentia was building something new, Zvirian was planning something unthinkable. The proposal that had paused for those telling seconds would lead to a possession that couldn't bear rejection. And the home invasion that would end her life had already begun in his mind. Sometimes we don't recognize the weight we've been carrying until someone helps us set it down. For Terentia, that someone was Henry, a man whose presence in her life marked not just a new relationship, but a return to the woman friends had missed seeing for months. The difference was immediately obvious to anyone who knew Terentia well. Where once there had been careful photo selections and strategic social media posts, now there were spontaneous moments captured without thought, genuine smiles, easy laughter, the kind of joy that can't be manufactured for an audience. The contrast between these two men couldn't have been starker. While Zvirian Brent was accumulating felony charges and weapons violations, a pattern of behavior that painted an increasingly troubling picture, Henry was building a reputation as a responsible young man with a passion for football and a commitment to his community. Henry wasn't just different from Zvirian, he was everything that the relationship had failed to be. Where there had been control, there was now respect. Where there had been growing distance, there was now genuine connection. But perhaps the most telling difference was how Henry approached Terentia's existing world. Rather than seeing her daughter as competition for attention or a complication to navigate, he embraced the role of stepfather with a natural grace that surprised even Terentia. Friends say watching Henry with Zorencia was watching a man who understood that loving Terentia meant loving all of her, not just the parts that were easy or convenient. He showed up for bedtime stories, helped with homework, and became the stable male presence both mother and daughter had been missing. In those final weeks, their routine had settled into something almost domestic: dinner together, time with Zarencia, quiet evenings that spoke of a future being built rather than a past being forgotten. On June 6, 2022, Henry posted what would become a haunting image, the last photo he'd ever take with Terentia. They're lying in bed, both looking tired but peaceful. He captioned it simply, "This was our last moment before we went to sleep, not knowing the devil was plotting on us." Look at their faces in that moment. There's exhaustion there, the kind that comes from long days and busy lives, but also contentment. Neither shows any awareness that just hours later, their world would explode in violence. As they settled into sleep that night, neither Terentia nor Henry could have known that they had been watched, that their addresses had been memorized, that their routines had been studied with the methodical patience of someone planning not just to intrude, but to destroy. While they dreamed of ordinary tomorrows, work schedules, weekend plans, groceries to buy, someone else was preparing to ensure those tomorrows would never come. For Zvirian Brent, the sight of Terentia building a life without him had become unbearable. The safety they felt in Henry's apartment was an illusion. The locked doors, the quiet neighborhood, the presence of someone strong enough to protect her, none of it would matter against the rage of a man who had decided that if he couldn't have Terentia, no one could. As the clock ticked past 3 a.m. on June 7, the final act of this tragedy was already in motion. Terentia Jackson had successfully left one relationship and found peace in another. She had protected her daughter, rebuilt her happiness, and dared to dream again. But some escapes are mistaken for betrayals. Some rejections are heard as challenges. And some men respond to "no" with violence that makes headlines. The door that would soon splinter wasn't just wood and locks, it was the barrier between the life Terentia had chosen and the one her ex-fiancé was determined to force upon her. While Terentia was learning to trust again, rebuilding her life with a man who showed her what stability looked like, the past she'd tried to leave behind was painting an increasingly dark picture. Court records tell a story that begins long before Terentia ever met Zvirian Brent, a story written in arrests, violations, and always, guns. The pattern starts in 2015. Police arrested Zvirian on felony charges for possession of marijuana and hydrocodone. But it's what else they find that foreshadows everything that would follow: a .38 caliber handgun in his possession. The combination of drugs and weapons would become Zvirian's signature. 2 years later, in 2017, the script repeats itself with chilling familiarity. Another felony possession charge, another weapon, this time a .40 caliber Glock. The guns are getting bigger. The pattern is getting clearer. Yet somehow, he keeps walking free. Then, in July 2021, less than a year before he would take Terentia's life, a decision that would haunt everyone involved. Judge Winston Kidd dismisses Zvirian's case at the request of his probation officer. The system that should have contained him instead set him loose. Think about this timeline. 11 months. In those 11 months, Terentia would propose, hesitate, leave him, and find Henry. And in those same 11 months, Zvirian would remain free, carrying both the weapons and the rage that would ultimately destroy her. When investigators began piecing together the events following the shooting, a name emerged that deepened the mystery: Vida Valentine, 28 years old. While police were searching for Zvirian, bleeding from gunshot wounds but determined to escape justice, Valentine was actively helping him evade capture. Why would a 28-year-old woman risk everything to help a killer hide? The relationship between Valentine and Zvirian remains unclear, but her actions spoke of loyalty that would cost her freedom. She's charged with accessory after the fact to capital murder, a decision that would change her life forever. Domestic violence experts who study these cases have a term for what Terentia experienced: separation violence. The statistics are stark. A woman is 75 times more likely to be killed by her abuser when she tries to leave than when she stays. Every warning sign was there, documented in arrest records, visible in his escalating relationship with weapons, evident in a justice system that kept releasing him despite repeated offenses. But warning signs only work when someone knows how to read them. While Terentia posted photos of date nights and family moments, built a life around faith and work, and motherhood, Zvirian was quietly accumulating both weapons and grievances. The guns got bigger. The charges got more serious. The dismissals kept coming. In hindsight, every dismissed charge, every released firearm, every decision that kept Zvirian on the streets rather than behind bars feels like a countdown to June 7. The system designed to protect women like Terentia instead became complicit in her death. By early June 2022, all the pieces were in place. Zvirian had the weapons, multiple guns acquired despite his felony record. He had the motivation, a woman who dared to leave him for someone else. And he knew, tracking her to Henry's apartment with the persistence of someone who had been planning this moment for months. What he didn't have was a plan for the aftermath, because while Zvirian had prepared to kill, he hadn't prepared to survive his violence. The bullets that struck Henry would be matched by bullets that found their mark in Zvirian himself, sending all 3 participants in this tragedy to hospitals, though only 2 would leave alive. The wheels had been set in motion years before, through courts that couldn't predict the future, through a system that measured justice in paperwork rather than protection. Now, as dawn approached on June 7, that failure was about to explode into violence on Fleetwood Drive. Inside that apartment, Terentia and Henry slept with the profound ignorance of those who think they've escaped danger. Outside, the past was about to force its way through the present, armed with everything a broken system had failed to take away. June 7, 2022, 3:15 a.m. While most of Jackson was asleep, Zvirian Brent moved through the dark streets with a plan. His phone showed he wasn't lost, he was hunting. He was following Terentia straight to Henry's apartment on Fleetwood Drive. This wasn't random. Messages on his phone proved he'd been watching them for weeks. He knew her schedule, her new address, and all the places she felt safe. Tonight, he decided to destroy that safety. At 3:45 a.m., security cameras caught what police would later call the approach. You can see him moving through the shadows, checking apartment numbers like someone who knows exactly where he's going. It's scary to watch someone planning violence. The way he stops at the door, the way he stands there. Even on blurry security footage, you can tell the exact moment he makes up his mind. 3:52 a.m. The noise that changes everything. Not a knock. The front door of Henry's apartment crashes open with the force of someone who's been planning this for months. Inside, Terentia and Henry wake up suddenly. But Zvirian doesn't want to talk or argue. He walks straight through the apartment, knowing exactly which door leads to the bedroom, knowing exactly where to find her. He kicks in the bedroom door. In those last seconds, 3 lives hang in the balance. Terentia sees her worst fear in the doorway. Henry realizes he needs to protect her. And Zvirian reaches the moment his obsession has been building toward. What happens next is so fast that it's hard to piece together. Multiple gunshots. Terentia is hit several times in the place she should have felt safest. But Henry fights back. His football training and quick reflexes take over. In a desperate attempt to save Terentia and himself, Henry grabs his gun and shoots back at Zvirian. Henry's bullets hit Zvirian multiple times. Wounded and bleeding, Zvirian does something that shows he's not ready to die for his crime. He runs away, leaving behind what first responders would later call a war zone. By the time police arrive at 4:04 a.m., 3 people have been shot. Terentia is dying from multiple gunshot wounds. Henry, though shot himself, is awake enough to tell police who did this. And somewhere in the streets of Jackson, Zvirian Brent is bleeding as he runs, his plan having gone terribly wrong. At the hospital, doctors try desperately to save both victims. But Terentia's wounds are too severe. The woman who once hesitated before accepting a proposal now faces an end she never chose, killed in a bed she shared with someone who gave her hope, by someone who couldn't let her go. 4:37 a.m. Terentia Munchie Jackson is declared dead. She was only 26, a mother, a daughter, a woman who had finally found happiness with a man who lived to tell her story. The apartment on Fleetwood Drive shows how quickly a safe home can become a crime scene, how a locked door can't stop someone with rage and a gun, how the distance Terentia put between herself and danger wasn't measured in miles, but in how long it took to kick down 2 doors. As the sun rises over Jackson, the hunt for Zvirian begins. He's hurt, running, and someone is helping him hide. But the evidence he left behind, from bullet casings to broken doors to witnesses, is already building the case that will lead to his capture. The question isn't who did it or why anymore, it's when and where they'll find him. And in a city with hospitals, phone tracking, and a community angry about domestic violence, a killer's freedom wouldn't last long. By 6 a.m., what had been a quiet residential street was transformed into a crime scene that would dominate Jackson's morning news. The coroner's van backed into the driveway as neighbors gathered on sidewalks, their morning routines shattered by yellow tape and the reality that murder had visited their neighborhood. Local stations interrupted programming with breaking news, woman shot dead in bed, boyfriend injured in South Jackson home invasion. But these early reports couldn't capture the complexity of what had unfolded, the years of warning signs, the failed intervention by the justice system, the love triangle that ended in bloodshed. While reporters pieced together the basic facts, investigators were already following blood trails that would lead them to their suspect. Zverian Brent had escaped the scene, but he hadn't escaped unharmed. Multiple gunshot wounds from Henry's defensive fire meant he was somewhere in Jackson, bleeding and desperate for medical attention. The manhunt strategy was simple: monitor every hospital emergency room in the area. A man seeking treatment for multiple gunshot wounds in the hours following a domestic murder wouldn't be hard to find. It was just a matter of time. But while police tracked Zverian through medical channels, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Within 24 hours, they arrested 28-year-old Vida Valentine at her apartment, uncovering evidence that she had been actively helping Zverian evade capture. The question everyone asked was why. Why would Valentine risk becoming an accessory to capital murder for a man who had just killed his ex-fiancée? The answer lay in phone records showing she had been in communication with Zverian both before and after the shooting, suggesting this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision to help a friend, but something more calculated. Then came the breakthrough authorities had been waiting for. Just one day after Valentine's arrest, hospital staff at the University of Mississippi Medical Center contacted police about a patient matching Zverian's description who had been admitted with multiple gunshot wounds. The irony wasn't lost on investigators. While Terentia lay in the morgue, her killer was receiving the medical care that might save his life. Justice had a sick sense of humor, or perhaps this was exactly how it was meant to work, ensuring Zverian would live to face the consequences of his actions. Deputy Chief Derek Hearn of Jackson Police addressed the media. The suspect is in custody and receiving treatment under police supervision. He will remain hospitalized until doctors clear him for transfer to the Jackson Police Department holding facility, then to Raymond Detention Center. When Zverian Brent was finally strong enough to appear before a judge, the courtroom became the first official arena where he would face the magnitude of his actions. Still recovering from his wounds, he appeared in a hospital gown, flanked by deputies who had been told to take no chances. The proceeding was brief but powerful. Charged with murder and attempted murder, Zverian's attorney requested bond, perhaps expecting the routine dance of bail amounts and conditions that defines most criminal proceedings. But Judge Winston Kidd, the same judge who had dismissed Zverian's earlier charges just months before, had no hesitation this time. Bond denied. Return to custody immediately. 6 words that sealed Zverian's fate and perhaps offered some small measure of justice for Terentia. In the gallery, Terentia's family watched the man who had taken their daughter's life be led back to custody. For some, seeing him wounded and restrained offered a moment of satisfaction. For others, no amount of justice could fill the void he had created. Outside the courtroom, Jackson's community grappled with questions that go beyond individual tragedy. How many other Zverian Brents are walking free, armed with weapons and warrants? How many other Terentia Jacksons might be saved if the system that failed her the first time learns from her death? The arrest and initial hearing marked the beginning of justice, not its end. As Valentine faced her own charges and Zverian confronted a justice system that had repeatedly given him chances he would eventually use to commit murder, the real accounting was just beginning. But for Terentia's family, justice in a courtroom could never restore what was lost in that bedroom. As legal proceedings moved forward, they faced the harder work of grief, of explaining to a young girl why her mother wasn't coming home, of finding meaning in a death that felt so preventable. The wheels of justice turned with their customary slowness, but they were turning. Zverian Brent would never again walk free among the people his violence had shattered. Valentine would learn the cost of loyalty to the wrong cause. And perhaps, in time, the system that failed Terentia might learn something from her story, lessons written in blood but meant to save lives. In all the headlines, court documents, and police reports, one name appears only briefly: Zorencia Jackson. At such a young age, she has become the story's most innocent victim, a child whose mother was taken by a violence she will spend years trying to understand. Those who've tried to explain Mommy's absence speak of the impossible task of translating adult obsession into words a child can process. How do you tell a daughter that the person who was supposed to love her mother chose to hurt her instead? How do you promise safety when the world has already broken its promise to protect? Henry carries different scars, physical wounds that will heal with time, and emotional ones that may never fully close. Still recovering from his gunshot injuries, he made a decision that speaks to the depth of his connection with Terentia: a memorial that would last as long as his own life. The tattoo artists captured her smile, the one Henry fell in love with, the one that never made it to their next morning together. When he posted the photo, his caption was simple: "Got in my feelings, so I went and got it finished." But those words carry the weight of survivor's guilt, the need to keep her memory visible to a world that moves too quickly past tragedy. For Antoinette Jackson and Terrence Womack, the loss defies description. They raised 8 children, celebrating each milestone, navigating each crisis as parents do. But nothing prepares you for outliving a child, especially one taken by such preventable violence. Among her 7 siblings, Terentia had been what psychologists call a family nexus, someone whose energy helps bind others together. Her brothers speak of holiday traditions that feel incomplete. Her sisters describe a group chat that will forever show one member as offline. In a large family, her absence creates ripples that touch every gathering, every celebration. Domestic violence experts who study cases like Terentia's have identified a pattern they call separation violence. Statistics show that a woman is 75 times more likely to be killed by her partner during or after attempting to leave the relationship. The warning signs were all there, written in court documents and criminal histories that no one connected in time. The red flags included an ex-partner who tracks your location, someone with documented weapons violations, threats made after separation, and previous attempts to control or intimidate. Each of these warning signs was present in Zverian's behavior, documented in either police reports or the observations of those who knew Terentia. Jackson's community has responded with more than grief. They've organized support groups for domestic violence survivors, pushed for policy changes regarding weapons and protection orders, and created networks where women can safely leave dangerous relationships. The true measure of justice for Terentia won't come from courtrooms alone. It will come from the women who recognize her story in their own lives and find the courage to seek help. From the policymakers who strengthen protections for domestic violence survivors. From the community that learns to see warning signs not as personal drama but as emergencies requiring intervention. If someone you know shows fear around a current or former partner, if they're being monitored or controlled, if they've mentioned threats, these aren't private matters. These are potential life or death situations that require the same urgency we give to other emergencies. Terentia Munchie Jackson was 26 years old, a mother who celebrated every milestone with her daughter, a woman of faith who brought joy to her workplace, a sister who held together a family of 8, a woman who had the courage to leave one relationship and the hope to build another. Her story ends in tragedy, but her legacy lives in every woman who finds safety, every child who grows up without violence, every community that chooses awareness over silence. The door that was kicked in on Fleetwood Drive can't be repaired, but the doors we open, to shelters, to resources, to conversations about domestic violence, might save the next Terentia. If you or someone you know needs help, please reach out. Every story like Terentia's that ends in tragedy should be balanced by countless others that end in safety and survival. That's the justice she deserves and the future her memory demands. Rest in peace, Munchie. Your story will save lives.
This precious 6-year-old girl you see here, Zoe Jones, passed away. Her mother, Kiara Massenberg, who you also see, died yesterday. They were both victims of a quadruple shooting in a tragic case of domestic violence. Investigators say the suspect had a history of violence toward women and had gotten out of jail only a day before the shooting.
He told her exactly how it would end. No one listened. The most dangerous time for a victim of domestic violence isn't when they're being abused. It's when they try to leave. For Kiara Massenberg, the system that should have protected her instead gave her abuser exactly what he needed: a timeline. August 10th, 2024. The cell door opens. Decoyne Jones walks free after fracturing his girlfriend's nose and knocking out her teeth just weeks earlier. A man with a documented history of extreme violence is released back into society with nothing but a court date. Within hours, he makes his intentions crystal clear on social media. "I found somebody too, and I'll be down there to finish the job if you survive." What you're about to witness isn't just a failure of the justice system. It's a countdown to murder. 24 hours later, a 6-year-old girl fights for her life in an emergency room. Her mother's body lies in the back seat of a car, abandoned. 2 others are rushed into surgery with gunshot wounds. and the man responsible has barricaded himself inside a home in Nash County. How does a man go from posting threats online to executing a multi-county shooting spree in less than a day? And why was he free to do it in the first place? This isn't just another headline about domestic violence gone tragically wrong. This is the story of a system that failed to protect a young mother who was desperately trying to escape. This is the story of a child caught in the crossfire of a relationship defined by terror and control. This is the story of Kiara Massenberg, 27 years old, described by friends as kind, loving, and sweet. A woman who danced in TikTok videos and dreamed of a better future. This is the story of her daughter Zoe Jones, just 6 years old, a bright-eyed little girl who would never get the chance to grow up. And this is the story of how the 24 hours after Decoy Jones' release from jail became a countdown to an unthinkable tragedy that could have, should have, been prevented. The warning signs were there. The threats were explicit. The history of violence was documented. Yet somehow, on August 11, 2024, Decoy Jones was able to execute his final act of control, stealing the lives of those he claimed to love. What you're about to witness isn't just a true crime story, it's a wake-up call. Welcome to True Crime Tales HQ, where we don't just tell stories, we expose the truth behind the headlines that shatter lives and communities. Before we dive into today's case, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Each subscription helps us continue bringing these important stories to light, and hitting the notification bell ensures you never miss an upload. If you find this story impactful, please share it. Your share could literally save someone's life. Today, we're diving into a case that left an entire community reeling and exposed critical gaps in our justice system. Gaps that allowed a documented abuser to carry out his final act of control. This is the story of Kiara Massenberg, just 27 years old, and her daughter Zoe, only 6. 2 lives violently ended by someone who should have been behind bars. Someone who claimed to love them. Someone who had already shown exactly who he was, over and over again. But this isn't just another tragic domestic violence case. What makes this story so devastating, so infuriating, is how preventable it was. Think about this. A man with multiple assault charges, who had recently knocked out his girlfriend's teeth and fractured her nose, was released from jail without any meaningful protection for his victims. Within 24 hours of that release, 4 people would be shot. 2 would lose their lives. How does this happen in a system designed to protect the vulnerable? What red flags were missed, or worse, deliberately ignored? And why was a man who had explicitly threatened to finish the job allowed to walk free with nothing but a future court date? The story I'm about to share will make you angry. It should. It will make you question how many other Kiaras and Zoes are out there right now, living under the shadow of threats from someone who should be behind bars. By the time we reach the end of this video, you'll understand not only the heartbreaking details of what happened on that August morning in Sharpsburg, North Carolina, but you'll also see the pattern of escalation that preceded it, the warning signs that flashed bright red for months before the tragedy. You'll learn about a justice system that failed to connect the dots, about bail decisions that prioritize process over protection, and about the crucial changes needed to prevent other families from suffering the same devastating fate. Because the truth is, Kiara and Zoe's story isn't unique. What happened to them is happening right now in communities across the country. The only difference is those stories haven't reached their tragic conclusion yet. So let's turn back the clock. Let's meet Kiara Massenberg before her name became a headline. When she was just a young mother with dreams, hopes, and a love for life that radiated through every video she shared with friends. Born on June 8, 1997, Kiara Massenberg was the kind of person who left an impression on everyone she met. Friends from Northern Nash High School, where she graduated in 2015, remember her infectious laugh and the way she could brighten even the gloomiest days. In the halls of that school, she was known as the friend who would always have your back, the one you could trust with anything. She was just so kind and loving, one friend recalled, the type of person who made you feel like you were the most important person in the room when she talked to you. Social media tells the story of a young woman who embraced life with open arms. Videos show Kiara dancing with friends, laughing at inside jokes, and creating memories that now serve as painful reminders of a life cut short. In one clip, she spins around with her arms outstretched, carefree and vibrant, a stark contrast to the fear she would later live with behind closed doors. But nothing brought Kiara more joy than her daughter Zoe. Born when Kiara was just 21, Zoe quickly became the center of her mother's world. Their bond was evident in every photo, every video, a love that radiated through the screen. Come on, Kiara's voice can be heard in one video as she encourages her daughter. Mom and daughter, get it going. The little girl with bright eyes and an even brighter smile inherited her mother's energy and joy for life. In these captured moments, they dance together, make silly faces at the camera, and share the kind of connection that can only exist between a mother and child who adore each other completely. And then there was Decoin Jones, Zoe's father. In the early days, he appeared in many of these family videos, playing with his daughter, sharing moments with Kiara that seemed to show a loving family unit forming. Mom, daughter, dad. Kiara's voice narrates over one clip as they all pose for the camera together. The footage paints a picture of domestic bliss, a young family finding their way together. Friends who knew them during those early years remember seeing what looked like love between Kiara and Decoin. He would post heartfelt messages on social media about their relationship. Through the ups and downs, good times and bad times, I got the one I wanted. I got the one I constantly go to war with and I'll go to bat for, constantly challenging each other to be better and do better. We ain't have it all, nor do we now, but what we've built together, I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else. The words seemed genuine. The pictures looked happy. From the outside looking in, they appeared to be just another young couple navigating the challenges of parenthood together. But appearances can be deceiving. What Kiara's friends witnessed in public, the loving gestures, the family outings, the affectionate social media posts, would soon reveal a much darker reality. Behind closed doors, away from the carefully curated images shared online, a dangerous pattern was already beginning to form. The relationship that once seemed like a source of happiness for Kiara would gradually transform into something unrecognizable, a prison from which she would desperately try to escape. And the man who once professed his love in flowery social media posts would soon reveal his true nature through actions that no words could justify or explain away. The warning signs were there, subtle at first, then increasingly impossible to ignore. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but rather through a series of escalating incidents that would eventually lead to an unthinkable conclusion. The first real signs of trouble showed up in late 2023, though friends later said they had worried even before that. What started as controlling behavior, checking Kiara's phone, always asking where she was going, keeping her away from friends, slowly turned into something much worse. By November 2023, things had gotten so bad that police got involved. Records show Decoin Jones was arrested in Rocky Mount for causing a disturbance, fighting with a police officer and threatening Kiara. The threat was clear and frightening. "Do you think I'm playing? I'm going to hurt you." These weren't just empty words. They were a warning that nobody took seriously enough. Despite his arrest and the clear threat, Decoin soon came back into Kiara's life. The pattern that experts see in abusive relationships played out. Tension building up, followed by violence, followed by a period of apologies and promises to change. Then it would all start again, getting more dangerous each time. By summer 2024, the violence had reached a new level. In July, just 1 month before the tragedy, Decoin's anger turned into a brutal attack that left visible injuries. Court records show he punched Kiara in the face so hard that he knocked out her teeth and broke her nose. He was charged with felony assault, but Kiara didn't get the protection she desperately needed. What makes this case especially disturbing is how Decoin kept up a fake image in public while becoming more violent in private. His social media became a stage where he played two different roles. One day posting loving messages about Kiara, the next day making barely hidden threats. Through the ups and downs, good times and bad times, he would write in one post, making himself look like a devoted partner. Then just days later, his tone would completely change. "I found somebody else, me, I found them too, and I'll be down there to finish the job if you survive." This two-faced behavior did more than just manipulate Kiara. It confused people who might have otherwise seen the danger she was in. It let friends and family hope that maybe things weren't as bad as they sometimes seemed. After all, would someone who was abusive post such loving messages for everyone to see? Meanwhile, Kiara was trying to find a way out. Friends later said she had been planning to leave the relationship, gathering what she needed to make a clean break. But leaving an abuser is known to be the most dangerous time for victims. When an abuser feels they're losing control, that's when the risk of deadly violence goes way up, says one counselor who works with domestic violence victims. Abusers often would rather see their partners dead than free. Leaving is hard for many reasons. Money problems, worry about children, fear of worse violence, and not having a safe place to go all make escaping difficult. For many victims, leaving isn't just one decision, but a process that takes careful planning and support. Kiara was in the middle of that process when DeCoin was released from jail on August 10, 2024, after his arrest for the attack that left her with missing teeth and a broken nose. He had served very little time and was let out with just a future court date. No one realized that his release would start a 24-hour countdown to tragedy. The man who had openly threatened to finish the job was now free to carry out that threat. And Kiara, who was actively planning her escape, had run out of time. The system that should have protected her instead gave her abuser exactly what he wanted: access. And he would use that access to commit violence so extreme that it would leave an entire community in shock and 4 families forever changed. The morning of August 11, 2024 began like any other Sunday in Sharpsburg. Neighbors later recalled seeing DeCoin's car parked outside Kiara's home on Weaver Circle early that morning. What happened inside that house in those early hours would only be pieced together later through police investigations and witness statements. What we do know is that around 5 a.m., the first shots were fired. DeCoin Jones, less than 24 hours after his release from jail, had gained access to a firearm. In a moment of unimaginable cruelty, he turned that weapon on his own daughter, 6-year-old Zoe, as Kiara watched in horror. The bullet struck the child's small body, causing life-threatening injuries. But rather than calling for medical help immediately, DeCoin forced Kiara into his car with their wounded daughter. This was only the beginning of a morning-long nightmare that would stretch across 2 counties and claim multiple victims. DeCoin drove approximately 10 minutes to a home on Lee Road in Nash County. There, in an act that shows both calculation and callousness, he dropped off his critically injured daughter. He didn't wait for help to arrive. He didn't ensure she would receive immediate medical attention. He simply left her there, bleeding and struggling to breathe, before driving away with Kiara still in the car. When emergency services finally arrived at the Lee Road address, the scene they encountered was devastating. Nash County EMS responders found Zoe barely clinging to life, her breathing shallow and irregular. "Now C units reference Lee Road," the dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. "Sheriff's office on scene is going to be a 6-year-old female victim with shallow breathing is requesting emergency traffic." As medical personnel rushed Zoe to the hospital, fighting to save her young life, DeCoin was already 20 minutes away, driving toward his friend's house on Jamie Road with Kiara still in the vehicle. What conversations or pleas took place inside that car during that drive will never be known. Upon arriving at the Jamie Road address, DeCoin encountered 2 longtime friends, Devontae Ricks and Mika Pagee, who immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. Perhaps they noticed blood on his clothes, or the terror in Kiara's eyes, or simply the unnatural tension radiating from a man they had known for years. When they attempted to intervene, to understand what was happening and possibly help Kiara, DeCoin responded with more violence. In quick succession, he shot both Ricks and Pagee, seriously wounding them but not killing them. They would later become crucial witnesses to the events of that morning. It was in the driveway of this home, with his wounded friends seeking cover, that DeCoin committed his most calculated act. He turned his gun on Kiara, who was still sitting in the back seat of the car, and shot her at close range. He left her body there, not bothering to hide what he had done, before running into his friend's house. The homeowner, Shauna Leuston, was asleep when DeCoin burst in. "I heard pal, pal," and then police yelling, "Get down, get down." Leuston would later tell reporters, still in shock as he described how his home became the final scene of this tragedy. When police arrived at the Jamie Road address, responding to reports of gunshots, they surrounded the house. As officers approached, a single shot rang out from inside. Decoy Jones had turned his weapon on himself, his final act of violence directed inward. What makes this crime even more devastating is that it unfolded across multiple locations over several hours. A methodical trail of violence that suggests not a moment of blind rage, but a planned execution carried out with chilling precision. 4 crime scenes stretched across 2 counties. 4 victims, including the shooter himself, and all of it preventable. In the hospital, doctors worked desperately to save little Zoe. For hours, there was a glimmer of hope that at least one innocent life might be spared from this senseless violence. But despite the medical team's best efforts, Zoe's injuries proved too severe. The bullet that had been meant to punish her mother had claimed the life of a child who had done nothing wrong except exist as a connection between 2 adults. One who loved her completely and one who was willing to destroy her to maintain control. As police worked to piece together what had happened that morning, they faced the challenge of processing multiple crime scenes spread across 2 counties. Sheriff's deputies from both Wilson and Nash counties coordinated their responses, securing evidence at Weaver Circle, where the violence began, at the Lee Road address, where Zoe had been abandoned, and at the Jamie Road home, where the final shootings occurred. There was a BOLO put out for the possible suspect, Sheriff Keith Stone later explained by phone to reporters at the scene. The suspect was located in Nash County near B Rock, and when officers pulled up, there was 1 shot fired. Inside the house on Jamie Road, officers found Decoy Jones deceased from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Outside in the backseat of his car, they discovered Kiara Massenberg's body. She had died almost instantly from her wounds, according to the medical examiner's preliminary report. 2 more victims, Devontae Ricks and Mika Pagee, had been rushed to ECU Health with serious gunshot wounds. At another hospital, medical staff fought desperately to save 6-year-old Zoe. The bullet had caused catastrophic internal injuries, and despite multiple surgeries and the medical team's best efforts, her small body was losing the battle. For nearly 48 hours, there was a glimmer of hope. Local news outlets reported she was in critical but stable condition. Prayer chains formed across the community as people who had never met the little girl hoped for a miracle. But on August 13, hospital officials confirmed what many had feared. Zoe Jones had succumbed to her injuries. A child who had been looking forward to starting 1st grade would never get that chance. A life full of potential had been extinguished by an act of violence meant to punish her mother. Back in Sharpsburg, a community of just 1,500 people struggled to process what had happened. In a town where everyone seemed to know everyone, the ripple effects of the tragedy touched nearly every resident. Churches held vigils. School counselors prepared to help classmates understand why Zoe's desk would be empty. Neighbors placed flowers, stuffed animals, and handwritten notes at makeshift memorials that appeared outside both Kiara's home and the Lee Road address. It happened, and it's like a lifetime movie, Shauna Lustin told reporters, his voice hollow with shock as he stood outside his home, now a crime scene. Unfortunately, this is no movie. A Lustin, who had been asleep when Decoy burst into his house that morning, still struggled to process what had happened. He had known both Jones and Kiara for years, considered them friends. There had been no warning that his home would become the final scene in this tragedy. "I'm still processing the loss of life," he admitted, looking numb as police continued to work around him. For now. While the community mourned, medical staff at ECU Health continued to treat Devontae Ricks and Mika Pagee, the 2 friends who had tried to intervene and were shot for their efforts. After multiple surgeries, doctors announced that both were expected to survive their injuries, though their recovery would be long and difficult. Their testimony would later prove crucial in reconstructing the events of that day, providing details that Kiara and Zoe could no longer share. Sheriff Callan Woodard of Wilson County released a statement that captured the community's grief. "This is an incident that is disheartening to the community and to all the families that will endure this pain for the rest of their lives. Mr. Jones's actions have restricted a child from having a chance to enjoy life, play with dolls, go to prom, and tell her mother that she loves her every day." As days passed, the memorial at the crime scene continued to grow. Teddy bears, Princess dolls and handwritten cards accumulated, small tributes to lives cut short. Among the items, a school photo of Zoe smiled out from beneath a clear plastic cover, protected from the rain. Next to it, someone had placed a framed picture of Kiara, her arms wrapped protectively around her daughter. The physical evidence of the crime would eventually be cleared away. The police tape would come down, houses would be cleaned and repaired. But for the community of Sharpsburg, the invisible wounds would take much longer to heal, if they ever did. And for the families of Kiara and Zoe, for the friends who had tried to help, for the first responders who had witnessed the aftermath, life would be forever divided into before and after August 11th, 2024. As investigators dug deeper into DeCoin Jones's past, a disturbing pattern emerged, one that should have triggered alarm bells long before that tragic August morning. This wasn't his first brush with violence. Court records revealed a 2019 conviction for assault on a female and false imprisonment, charges that hint at the controlling behavior that would later escalate to murder. That conviction should have been a warning sign, a red flag in the system. Yet somehow, despite this documented history of violence, specifically targeting women, DeCoin Jones continued to move through the justice system as if he posed no special threat. The paper trail only becomes more damning as you follow it forward in time. November 2023, arrested for communicating threats against Kiara, telling her explicitly, "I'm going to hurt you." July 2024, arrested for felony assault after punching Kiara with such force that he knocked out her teeth and fractured her nose. Each incident more severe than the last. Each charge pointing toward a man whose violence was escalating in both frequency and intensity. Experts in domestic violence will tell you this pattern is textbook. It's the very definition of an abuser who is becoming more dangerous over time. Yet when DeCoin appeared before a judge after the July assault, he was eventually released without special conditions designed to protect Kiara and Zoe. The system is designed to process cases, not to assess danger, explains one domestic violence advocate who works within the court system. Judges are making decisions based on legal factors, flight risk, prior failures to appear, not necessarily on how dangerous someone might be to a specific person. This gap in the system creates a deadly blind spot. Studies show that when an abuser is released from jail, the 72 hours immediately following release represent a period of extreme danger for victims. During this window, the risk of homicide increases dramatically, by some estimates, as much as 5 times the normal risk. The reasons are both practical and psychological. An abuser who has been jailed feels a loss of control, something abusers cannot tolerate. They often blame their victim for their arrest. They've had time to ruminate on revenge, and upon release, they have immediate freedom of movement with emotions running high. Despite these well-documented risks, DeCoin Jones walked out of jail on August 10th with nothing more than a future court date. No electronic monitoring, no temporary restraining order automatically triggered by his release. No system in place to alert Kiara that the man who had threatened to finish the job was now free to do exactly that. In some jurisdictions, automated victim notification systems would have sent Kiara a text or call informing her of DeCoin's release. But in this rural North Carolina county, no such system was in place. Kiara may not have even known that the father of her child, the man who had knocked out her teeth just weeks earlier, was free and looking for her. The most tragic aspect of this systematic failure is how predictable the outcome was. DeCoin Jones didn't just hint at what he might do, he announced it publicly on social media. "I'll be down there to finish the job if you survive." The words couldn't be clearer. The intent couldn't be more explicit. Yet somehow this digital evidence of premeditation didn't translate into protective action. There's often a disconnect between digital evidence and real-world protections, says a former prosecutor who specialized in domestic violence cases. Threats made online aren't always captured in official records or presented during bail hearings. Even when they are, they may not be given the weight they deserve. This disconnect costs lives. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, approximately 72% of all murder-suicides involve an intimate partner, and 94% of the victims of these crimes are female. In cases where victims were killed by their abusers, approximately 20% had protective orders in place at the time of their murders. The statistics tell a grim story about a system that simply wasn't designed to address the unique dynamics of domestic violence. Traditional criminal justice approaches often fail to account for the ongoing relationship between perpetrator and victim, the power imbalance, the history of control, and the heightened danger during separation attempts. Looking at the trail of missed opportunities in Kiara and Zoe's case raises a painful but necessary question. Would they still be alive today if the system had recognized the imminent danger they were in? If D. Coyne had been held longer, if special conditions had been attached to his release, if Kiara had been notified immediately, if a risk assessment had flagged his case as high danger, any one of these interventions might have changed the outcome. Drop your thought in the comment section, and don't forget to like and share this video so many can learn from this incident. Instead, a man with a documented history of violence, who had explicitly threatened to finish the job, was released with no special precautions. And 24 hours later, a mother and daughter were dead, 2 friends were seriously injured, and a community was left to wonder how such a preventable tragedy could have been allowed to unfold. Behind the headlines and statistics are 2 lives that mattered deeply. Kiara Massenburg wasn't just a victim of domestic violence. She was a devoted mother, a cherished friend, and a pillar of strength to those who knew her best. Friends describe a woman who faced mounting dangers with remarkable courage, all while trying to create a normal, happy life for her daughter. Kiara was someone who would give you her last dollar if you needed it, remembers a childhood friend who knew her since elementary school. She loved hard and protected those she cared about fiercely. Zoe Jones, at just 6 years old, had barely begun her life journey. Teachers describe a bright, curious child who loved drawing rainbows and whose laughter could change the mood of an entire classroom. She had recently lost her first tooth and was excited about starting first grade. She was always the first to help other kids who were sad, her kindergarten teacher recalls. She had this way of noticing when someone was having a bad day and would just go sit with them quietly. The memorial service held at Northern Nash High School, where Kiara had graduated in 2015, overflowed with mourners. Hundreds gathered to share stories, photos, and memories of the mother and daughter. Small details emerged that painted a fuller picture of their lives. How Kiara would dance around the kitchen while cooking dinner. How Zoe insisted on wearing mismatched socks because life is too short for boring socks. A GoFundMe campaign established to help with funeral expenses surpassed its goal within days, a testament to how deeply the community wanted to support the family in their unimaginable grief. The description reads simply, "For a 6-year-old who will never get to play with dolls, go to prom, or tell her mother that she loves her every day." Kiara and Zoe's story represents a failure that extends beyond one man's violent actions. It highlights critical gaps in a system meant to protect those in danger. Recognizing the warning signs of potentially lethal domestic violence could save countless lives in similar situations. Experts point to several red flags that indicate when abuse might turn deadly: threats to kill, access to firearms, strangulation attempts, controlling behaviors, stalking, and explicit threats like the ones D. Coyne posted on social media. Perhaps most significant is when an abuser senses they're losing control, typically when a victim attempts to leave the relationship, as Kiara was planning to do. The most dangerous time for a victim is when they're trying to escape, explains a domestic violence counselor. This is when the system needs to provide the most protection, not the least. Organizations across the country work tirelessly to support those trapped in violent relationships. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-SAFE, provides 24/7 crisis support, safety planning, and local resource connections. Many communities have safe houses and legal advocacy services specifically designed to help victims navigate the complex process of leaving abusive partners safely. But systemic changes are also desperately needed. Advocates push for several critical reforms: automatic temporary restraining orders when domestic violence suspects are released from jail, GPS monitoring for high-risk offenders, mandatory victim notification systems to alert victims when abusers are released, and specialized risk assessment tools that help judges identify potentially lethal situations. The solutions exist, one advocate points out. What's missing is the political will to implement them consistently across jurisdictions. Viewers can make a difference by supporting these reforms, volunteering with local domestic violence organizations, and learning to recognize warning signs among friends and family members who might be in danger. Sheriff Kellen Woodard's statement captures both the tragedy and the challenge. This is an incident that is disheartening to the community and to all the families that will endure this pain for the rest of their lives. Perhaps most powerful is the simple truth that violence is never the only option. As one community member noted during Kiara and Zoe's memorial service, only a weak man would stoop so low to cause so much pain. Men are supposed to be able to walk away or talk things out. These words cut to the heart of preventing future tragedies, recognizing that domestic violence isn't about love or passion or even anger. It's about control. And when that control is threatened, the most dangerous abusers will destroy what they can no longer possess. On August 11, 2024, a 24-hour window of opportunity to save lives closed forever. A man with a documented history of violence, who had threatened to finish the job, did exactly what he promised. Kiara Massenberg and her 6-year-old daughter Zoe became statistics in America's ongoing domestic violence crisis. 2 more lives lost in a tragedy that was both predictable and preventable. Their story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about a system that repeatedly fails those it's meant to protect. How many red flags need to be raised before our justice system takes domestic violence seriously enough to prevent murder? How many explicit threats must be made before we believe someone who tells us exactly what they plan to do? Decoyne Jones's criminal record, his escalating violence, his threatening social media posts, these weren't subtle hints. They were blaring alarms that something terrible was coming. Yet somehow, these warnings weren't enough to keep him behind bars or to shield Kiara and Zoe from harm. As we reflect on this heartbreaking case, we must remember that right now, in communities across the country, thousands of others are living under similar threats. People who go to bed each night wondering if tonight will be the night violence comes for them or their children. People who have done everything right, reported abuse, pressed charges, sought help, yet still don't feel safe. May Kiara's and Zoe's souls continue to rest in peace, and may their stories serve as both a memorial and a catalyst for change. If this story impacted you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with others. Stories like Kiara and Zoe's need to be heard, and your share could reach someone who needs to recognize these warning signs in their own life or the life of a loved one. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to True Crime Tales HQ for more in-depth investigations that expose the truth behind the headlines and potentially save lives. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. What changes do you think need to happen to prevent tragedies like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters in this conversation. Kiara and Zoe's story deserves to be told, not just to honor their memory, but to potentially save others who might be living in similar danger right now. Because sometimes survival depends on a system that believes victims the first time, not after it's too late to protect them.